When you were young, who did you want to sound like?
Well, the first music I ever heard. Music was never played in our house until we had an older sister, and she started playing Motown records. So the first things I heard were like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, people like this. And then I started listening to people like Mark Bolan, David Bowie, Roxy Music, and I guess they were the lasting influences at that point for some period, I think. And I probably modelled myself far too much on those people at that time because, again, I didn't have enough confidence in myself. I think not even until I'd started my own solo career did I find a way of singing which was totally natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
It took a very long time, and it's basically because of a kind of lack of confidence in myself, I think.
Even if it's very much you these days, it still have very much connections with some of your old favorites.
Of course it must do. I mean,
like Brian Ferry, for example.
Sure. I mean, no matter, if you're influenced by people when you're young, it's part of your education. You can't get away from it. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it happens in all worlds, you know, in all the arts. I mean, painters have the same problem. You know, the people who you're first influenced by are a lasting influence, and it's a positive thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's unfortunate. I mean, in the pop world, it's all. I think, especially when you're talking about young bands, you know, when they're still learning, when they're still discovering themselves, critics are too quick to point out the influences, and it's a negative thing to do that because it's not that relevant. I mean, especially with a young band, it's not that relevant to point out all their influences and make them aware of it and point and say it's a negative thing because it isn't necessarily so. Mm-hmm. I think it happens, you know, probably more so in this business than any other.
Yeah, you're mentioning the group Japan. I believe that many of those who know about you still connect you with that band, even though it was several years ago that it existed.
Sure. Well, it was 10 years of my life, you know, so I mean, yes, I can imagine that an emphasis is still placed on that part of my life for a lot of people.
Where are you from?
South East London. But I was brought up in the suburb of London, not in an artistic environment. My father was a builder, my mother a housewife. Me and my brother, Steve Jansen, we decided we wanted to get involved in music and started learning instruments. Steve immediately picked up on percussion, I on guitar, and I started writing immediately after I could play about 2 chords. And that's how it started. The rest of the group was formed through meetings with friends at school. I mean, there's so many groups are. And we just like clung together because we had the same ambitions, the same ideals at that time. And we learned to play our instruments together, all self-taught. And it was many years in the making, the group Japan. And we made many mistakes, many of them in public. And it wasn't until Japan's 3rd album, Quiet Life, when we began to settle down and realise, you know, our possibilities as musicians and just be able to put down our ideas positively on record for the first time. And from that period on, it was a growing process. I think Quiet Life was the happiest album we ever made. It was the easiest album, the most enjoyable album. From then on, it became more and more difficult, more and more intense to make albums together. Maybe because our ideals were getting higher, I don't know. Or maybe we were just pulling away from one another as people, wanting to go in different directions. Anyway, when we reached a kind of creative peak with the album Tin Drum, we found that we couldn't really exist together anymore comfortably because we were pulling in too many different directions, and we decided to break up the band.
What was it that you wanted to do at that time?
I suppose it was... I was getting very nervous about the kind of publicity we were receiving, and I was not enjoying being a popular pop personality. I was very uncomfortable in that role. I brought it on myself, yes, but I just didn't know how to cope with it, and I didn't realise, rather naively, how much it would interfere with my own private life. And I wanted begin to move away from that kind of public persona and really concentrate on the music and maybe move the music into a different, less commercial area. I'm not saying the other members of the band weren't interested in moving the music into less commercial areas, but I think, I mean, that was a conflict between Mick and myself. Mick enjoyed the kind of public response and wanted to play on that and keep that going. And I think that's what really pulled us two apart. And also because I was the songwriter, I was the one putting the greatest input into the group, and I think that the others felt creatively frustrated in some way. I was always open to ideas coming in, and always asking for contributions from them in writing, but they never really felt free enough to do it, or they never had the confidence to write and show me their compositions and discuss them and arrange them and so on. I mean, we got somewhere with Tin Drum, but I don't know, there was some inhibition there which we never got past, and it just had to stop.
Your position in the band creatively probably was too strong.
I think so. I think so. But I mean, to begin with, it was a positive thing, because I don't think that any of the others in the band really had ideas about direction and about composition as such, and I was leading in that respect in a positive way, but towards the end I think I was a negative influence on their own creativity. I was stifling their own creativity. Being brought up in suburban London, as in many places in the world I'm sure, is not an exciting existence. And
where was it?
In South East London. It's in Lewisham. And I think music sort of opened the door for us. We began to enjoy ourselves playing music and learning about music and writing music, but we also saw it as a way out of this environment, and that was an extremely positive point. It strengthened our ambition to move away from that situation.
It's a way to find an identity, an own one.
An own identity, and in a way to escape from yourself. I mean, it's both. I think at that age it's a kind of conflicting experience. You're really not sure what you're doing. Are you building up a kind of guise to hide behind and present to the world? I think I was doing that, being very shy by nature, and then having to get up on stage and sing songs. I mean, I purposely hid behind, a very bold image, and I think that was a mistake, because the music suffered because of it.
Is that why you had blonde hair and all that makeup?
It was partly to do with that, and partly as a kind of protest to my environment, which I disliked intensely. I mean, that's why I think a lot of young people react in that way, and find an outlet in the way they dress as a kind of protest to the way of life they're forced to lead. And it was that, and it was having something to hide behind, most definitely. And the music at that point, unfortunately, was doing the same thing. I wasn't writing about my own experiences or about myself. I was just writing, music, images, things to hide behind. And it took a while for me to discover how. I mean, to begin with, I wrote about direct experiences about myself, but that was when I was much younger. And as I got older, I found I had to hide behind something. I became very insecure, especially when I had to present these things to the public. And it took a long time to break down those barriers I was building up. And it was when, after Japan's second album, when we knew that we had made 2 albums that we didn't like at all. This was also due to outside pressure from management and record company. We decided, well, we're either going to split up now, or we're going to make amends and try to find the direction we want to pursue. And fortunately, we came across John Punter, a producer who was sympathetic to what we wanted to do. It was the first time we worked with a producer that was enthusiastic about the work. My writing changed a great deal. I started writing on keyboards, and there became more melodic pieces and more introspective pieces, and that was the beginning of me finding myself as a writer.